I didn't know Amy. I had never met her. Neither had any of my friends. Still, when I saw the poster of a missing girl in the town I used to call home, a suffocating feeling befell me. The feeling you have when something is entirely and utterly wrong. You can tell inside your soul that it is not how life is supposed to be. A girl so young, simply disappearing, leaving a family in pain. It's not something that should ever happen. And when it does, it can do strange things to the ones that witness it. Parents were particularly careful with their children now. Only to school and back, and none of you will walk alone. Jonah, watch your brother. I heard a mother call out to both of her sons as I walked to the grocery store to get some eggs for breakfast. Those words remind me of something. What do you call a nostalgia that is only bitter and not sweet? I faintly remember that we had a similar situation during my childhood. I was 5 or maybe 6 when a kid in town went missing. I'm not even sure whether I knew that child. I assume not very well. All I know is that the time was hard on all of us. Gately had a dark shadow cast over it. We lived in fear and dread. It was around then that many families left our town for good. Their homes felt stained. The memories of that time are blurry, but the emotions make up for it. When I think of that time in my life, a shiver goes down my spine. I don't think I'll ever be able to shake it off. I guess it even felt more wrong due to the contrast. Gately is absolutely lovely and vivid when the terrible isn't around the corner. Most people are friendly and kind. The ones that never left were prone to assure that all the ones who stayed felt safe. I believe it worked. I for once had a pretty great childhood here. There was more than enough to explore. Clubs to join, and even events were held regularly. Even when I went to college, I always looked forward to the times I would visit Gately. Just like now, I was looking forward to Dad's cooking and Grandma's baking. I was looking forward to seeing Maddie and Nicholas again, my childhood friends. I was definitely looking forward to the carnival that would be coming to town after I saw all the posters advertising the events. There was a big one next to the entrance of the grocery store, although it hardly stood up, surrounded by the many faces of the same girl. Posters of a missing girl, just like all those years ago. The picture was in black and white, but her shoulder-length hair must have been of the lightest blonde. Her eyes resembled 2 black buttons staring towards the camera. She was neither smiling nor frowning. Her expression looked almost apathetic in a way. Poor girl, she was so sweet. Gosh, and so young too. My head turned towards the voice that was speaking. I wasn't used to people randomly chatting me up anymore. I guess that is a small town thing. When did she go missing? I asked the elderly woman next to me. She didn't respond to my question. Poor little Amy. I hope they find her soon. She mumbled before walking inside the grocery store. The longer I looked at the poster, the worse I started to feel. It felt like it was hurting something I didn't even know existed inside of me. Finally, I managed to look away and went inside to get the eggs. As Dad, Grandma, and I sat around the kitchen table, having a late arrival breakfast for me, I was greeted by the face again, this time on a milk carton. Have you seen Amy? I didn't realize they actually printed these on milk cartons, I mumbled. What do you mean? My father asked. The missing kid. I thought these only existed in movies, I said as I held up the carton. Oh, that poor little Amy. What a horrible, horrible occurrence, my grandma chimed in. Absolutely, such a tragedy, my father added. Did you know her? I asked. I don't believe I've ever seen her in town. Although most kids kinda look the same anyway, I guess. Both Grandma and Dad were now looking at me. Their eyes were filled with disgust. Such a young soul. I hope she will be found soon, Grandma mumbled, ignoring my question. Who are her parents? I asked. Yes, kids should be with their parents, Grandma said as she grabbed the milk carton. She started inspecting the picture with a look I couldn't quite place. She was smiling, but her eyes looked scared. No, I mean, who is Amy? Grandma clawed her nails inside the milk carton, with a strength I didn't know she had. She pushed so deep into the carton that it broke. Milk was splashing everywhere, even to her face, but she didn't react in any way. She simply put the carton back down and continued having breakfast. I sure hope they find the poor girl soon, she whispered. What the hell? Why? I shrieked. Dad cut me off before I could say anything else. His expression was stern. I knew that look. Grandma's mind wasn't as sharp as it used to be, and we weren't supposed to confuse her. Anyway, you should go visit your friends after breakfast. Dad changed the subject. He smiled, but the milk on his face and on our table were only adding to the absurdity of the situation. While my friends weren't acting as entirely odd as my family, the subject of the missing girl seemed to result in weird reactions in them as well. I was hoping to find some answers with the friends I grew up with, but I only got more questions. Neither Maddie nor Nick knew the girl. They weren't sure who her parents were either. It's weird, right? I swear, it feels the same, I said. The same as what? Maddie asked. Like 20 years ago, when the other child went missing, was it a girl too? Maddie and Nick seemed confused. There was another missing child? Nick asked. Yeah, don't you remember? We weren't allowed to play for weeks and a bunch of people moved away. The two of them exchanged eye contact. That's strange. Are you sure you didn't make it up? Nick asked. And did they ever find the child? Not sure, I mumbled. Suddenly, I felt even stranger than before. Maddie smiled. Of course you're not sure, because it never happened. You shouldn't be spreading rumors. We should be focusing on finding poor little Amy, and that is all, Nick said. I couldn't help but laugh. What the fuck, guys? They didn't say anything, but Maddie started gently stroking my arm. It's okay, buddy. Horrible events as these can really screw with your mind. It will all be fine though. We only need to find Amy. I left Nick's home shortly after. In the past years, I didn't stay in touch with my friends as much as I wanted to over the years, but I still thought I knew them. Today, they felt like absolute strangers. They were odd, just like my father and my grandma. Truly, just like everyone in Gately. It's not that I had intended on speaking about the disappearance that much, but somehow I couldn't let go of it. I felt deeply involved even though I had no idea who Amy was. I didn't have any siblings who were the same age as her, or even cousins, but it still stuck with me. I presume all those pictures of her were part of the reason. Her face was everywhere. I thought there were many posters when I went outside earlier, but now it seems as if the entire town was plastered with them now. People kept saying how terrible it was. They kept repeating that we had to find the girl. Our town seemed supportive, for sure, but nobody seemed to actually do anything. There were posters and pictures everywhere, but I didn't see anyone actually searching. What had the disappearance of Amy done to them? And who were those girls' parents? And why did nobody but I seem to remember the last kidnapping 2 decades ago? No matter who I ask, I simply wouldn't receive an answer, to the point that I even started thinking of the unspeakable. I started wondering whether the people of Gately were somehow involved in the disappearance. Maybe it was somehow connected to the fact that this town is so prosperous and nice all the time. Although, if they were doing child offerings, I suppose they wouldn't be actively hanging posters with her face everywhere. Whatever was going on, it wasn't right. The people that I felt so safe and close with suddenly seemed exchanged. They weren't warm and kind anymore, but empty and frightening. One wrong word and they turned manic. The following days I tried to avoid the subject of the missing girl altogether. I didn't even leave home much and stayed neutral with Dad and Grandma. I didn't see my friends much either, until the first day of the carnival. Nick, Maddie, and I planned to go after Nick finished work. I wasn't as excited about it anymore after the last days, but it felt wrong to shut myself inside the whole time I was visiting. This was my home after all. I'm not sure what I was expecting. The carnival didn't come to town often, and so usually it would have been an exciting day. But as soon as I got close to the area, all of that was gone. This carnival was nothing more than a shell. The rides, the booths, the games, while all lights and music were turned on, none of them were really being operated. There were posters of the missing girl everywhere. People seemed to be walking around mindlessly. Townspeople that I recognized, like the librarian or school teachers, were there, though none of them seemed like themselves. They all had a forced smile on their face, while their eyebrows were turned into a frown. They were muttering words to themselves, the same ones they'd been repeating for days. Some of them had blood stains on them, but none of them seemed to care. When I looked over to my friends, I noticed the same stare. "Did you hear about that little girl going missing? Bless her poor little soul," Maddie whispered in a voice that didn't sound like hers. "Isn't it terrible that one among us is capable of such horrors?" Nick asked. I didn't say a word. I simply turned around to get home as quickly as I could. Whatever was going on at that carnival, I didn't want to witness it. Everyone had lost their minds. I ran all the way home. I had absolutely no idea what was happening to the town. The people didn't seem like themselves, and while I knew how absurd they were acting, the suffocating feeling inside of me wouldn't go away. I could only hope that somebody would find this girl soon. I took a deep breath before going inside my childhood home. I was dreading seeing my dad and grandma the way I saw my friends. I had no idea how to deal with that. Grandma was alone. I wasn't sure whether that was a good or bad thing. As I walked inside, I heard her rummaging through something in the living room. "What's that?" I carefully asked. Grandma didn't answer. She just kept sitting there, looking at pieces of paper. When I saw what she was looking at, I thought about turning around again. They were posters of Amy. But then I got closer, mostly because I was worried about Grandma, and I realized that those posters weren't entirely the same. They had different dates on them. Last seen, November 11th, 1995. Last seen, November 11th, 1975. Last seen, November 11th, 1955. Nobody that stayed here remembered the last times. Grandma had it right in front of her, but didn't seem to understand it. I couldn't blame her. I couldn't quite understand it either, why it was affecting us like this. I just can't shake that image out of my head. The picture of Amy with those black button eyes and ash blonde hair. That poor little girl must be afraid and cold, waiting for someone to rescue her. I guess that's why I'm writing to you. We simply must find Amy. Have you seen her?